Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Gilda Hilaire, and I'm the Senior Product Marketing Manager at Salesforce. Today, we have Marcus Slavina, Cameron Robert, and Jenna Madsen here to share best practices, typical use cases, and answer all your questions, your burning questions, that is, on Cloud Pages. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the question box in your GoToWebinar control panel. We will definitely address these during the webinar and at the end. We will also send the recording to the webinar and any link that's mentioned in the follow-up email. So please be on the lookout for that. Now, without further ado, we will get started. I will turn the time over to Jenna.
Good morning, everybody. This is Jenna from DEG and howtosfmc.com. And we are going to get started talking about Cloud Pages this morning with Marcus Sabina and Cameron Robert. Guys, why don't you tell us real quick a high-level overview of what Cloud Pages is and just how it interacts with the Marketing Cloud, or how you use it in the Marketing Cloud.
Yeah, sure. So Cloud Pages basically is a tool within Web Studio, which is a tool in Marketing Cloud. You can create your own landing pages that you can reach via email campaigns, for example, where you can build your forms, or a preference center, for example. That's a pretty common use case for Cloud Pages. So it's a pretty easy way to use your branded domain you have set up for email using the send authentication package to also build web pages on there. So it's not to build your whole website there, but it's for web pages that are part of your marketing campaigns. You can also use programmatic features of Marketing Cloud to interact with the API or with data extensions and all those kind of things. So it's a pretty easy way to make more sophisticated marketing communication campaigns.
Yeah, I'll back that up too by saying that the Cloud Pages are a great way to connect your email subscribers with content that's more rich about your campaigns. There are some sends that just don't require a web page on your CMS to get built, and sometimes a campaign landing page within Marketing Cloud can do the trick to convert that customer or to give them a call to action, such as registering for an event or adding their details to a survey or summary. It's a great feature that can use all the Marketing Cloud subscriber data, exactly as Marcus said, all those data extension values you already have, but it's also a great way to give a more rich experience for your subscribers. Because Cloud Pages are on the user's browser, you can use HTML5 and JavaScript and all the fun things that we can't do in email. So it's a great way to enhance that experience for your subscribers.
Excellent, thank you guys. And on that note, one of the questions that came in earlier on was, prior to the call, was what is the defining line between a custom preference center built with a cloud page versus using a different platform, tool, or technology to host the preference center?
I think Marcus, you had a good one for this one.
Yeah, sure. There are some relevant factors that you have to take into account. One of them is if you are using systems that should be reused or can be reused. So, for example, if you have your own online shop or a customer account on your website where you have the possibility to change the settings, that's maybe a good way to also integrate the communication preferences. So then that would be something to place your preference center at. And also another factor is, are you using other systems that need to be updated from the preference center? Then there's a good chance that another tool is the right thing for you, because you already have that in place and you have the API integrations to these other systems. But if you just are talking to Salesforce systems, so Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, and Marketing Cloud, then it's pretty straightforward to do that with Cloud Pages because you can interact with all of these systems via the standard functionality. So it's always a great way to do that for Cloud Pages, especially because you already have all the information from the subscriber just by using the Cloud Pages URL function within your emails. And yeah, just with one click, everything you need to know on the Cloud page is already there.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. The important thing with the Marketing Cloud data is that it has to have your customers' subscription information close by, because Marketing Cloud needs to know if a user is subscribed or unsubscribed, what their current email address is, and so on. So it's a great use case to use a Marketing Cloud preference center. If you haven't got those other login features or CRM functions elsewhere, if you've just got data within Marketing Cloud and no other systems, it can be a great way to make a really nice custom landing page for your subscribers to update their preferences or manage their subscriptions.
All right, excellent. And here's another one that came in ahead of time. How can we make this scalable for marketers and not just for iTeam and dev teams? So how do you scale Cloud Pages for marketers?
Yeah, definitely. There are some use cases for Cloud Pages like campaign landing pages or survey forms or registration for events, for example. And these kind of pages can be templatized. You can copy the code and you can reuse it using a bit of smart code. Now, an IT professional should be the one who sets that up, of course, and gets that started. But once it has been built, you could share that code with your marketing team, and they could be taught quite easily to copy and replace certain values of that Cloud Page code to make it reusable, to make it more approachable for a marketer to use. For larger projects like preference pages, though, they're probably not going to be approachable without a bit more knowledge of how to use AMP script and HTML and so on.
Absolutely. That makes complete sense. So they can be scaled for marketers pretty easily. What are best practices around for associating form submission data with data extensions, i.e. marrying subscriber key without, I don't know what they meant there, but yeah, so sorry guys, just what are some of your best practices for associating submission data with data extensions or getting that into a data extension from a Cloud page?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Oh, Marcus, take it away.
Yeah, the easiest way to do that is having the subscriber context just by the URL that you get by using the Cloud Pages URL function in AMP script within your email. So if you have a form that is linked from an email, which is the standard use case for Cloud Pages, then you already have the subscriber context and just can use the standard attributes like the _ subscriber key to link your data that's entered on the Cloud page to your subscriber. And if you don't have that because the Cloud page is visited organically by a link that's not within an email, then it's a bit more hard to do so because you need to take into account what data model you have and what are the identifiers that your customers give you via that form. One of the easier things is having unique email addresses in your system, but as we all know, that's not always the case. So there might be some other factors you need to add in for deduplication. So yeah, that's a business logic you need to define at your company, maybe together with the IT guys and the architects that set up your data model, for example, in Sales Cloud or the other connected systems.
Excellent, thank you. Speaking of AMP script, is there a way to pre-populate Cloud page forms with known subscriber data, kind of the reverse of what you were talking about there?
Yeah, definitely. So as Marcus was saying, if you're using a Cloud Page URL AMP script code in your emails, it means that those customers of yours who receive that email and click on that link, when they go to that Cloud page, they're going to have a little question mark and a QS at the end of that URL. And that query string parameter, what that's doing is that code behind that is actually an encrypted set of data, which Salesforce Marketing Cloud knows what to do with, and it knows that that customer who clicked through to that page, they know who the cloud page knows who it is. They know the subscriber key. Now with that subscriber key, you could then do a AMP script lookup against your customer's data extension, where of course, if you've already stored the customer's first name and other values in your subscriber list, you could of course look that value up as well. But if you can look those values up with the subscriber key, you can then pre-populate it into your fields on that cloud page. So in your input form field, you could use the value attribute and put in the AMP script code for that value. So for example, you could be gathering the subscriber key to then look up the email address. You could store the email address as a AMP script value, such as email address, and then use AMP script to output the email address value into the value parameter of your input field in your form on that cloud page.
Excellent, thank you. Staying on AMP script for just another minute, here we have some question from the audience. In AMP script, there's the cloud page URL function, and the person asking the question is saying that whenever they use this function, they've noticed it strips out special characters such as equal marks. Can you guys talk about the workarounds to get special characters back into those AMP script URLs after the encryption?
Yeah, so great question. The cloud page URL documentation shows that it's actually a key or a name value pairing. So you don't actually have to send through the entire parameter string, the entire string that are with it. So you don't actually require to send through the equals characters normally. If you are sending through multiple values, you can actually use it as a ordinal set. So the name value pairing, so for example, name and then the name, could be last name and then the last name and so on. So you don't have to send through the entire query string parameter field. If it is removing those question marks or the equal signs, just double check. When you say removing it, is it URL encrypting it into the URL encryption code for an equal sign, which I've totally forgotten what that code is off the top of my head. But if it is encrypting it or URL encoding it, should I say, you can then decode that on the cloud page side as well using some AMP script.
All right, thank you. Okay, makes total sense. Yeah, you do not need to put in those equal marks or the question mark to start your query string. What can anyone with access can anyone with access to a cloud page open the page, or is there a way to limit access to a selected audience?
Yeah, there are multiple ways to limit it to an audience. So, for example, you can check for the for some parameters, or just implement a way of authentication. So if you're using an endpoint, you can just check for IP addresses if it's just for internal use. If you're checking for customers, you can just check the parameters, but if they forward a link, they can access it in that way. But there's also the possibility to do some custom development where you manage the credentials that are possible, and where you just check if those credentials are known to you. That could be done via a data extension, or for example within the code. But there is also an SSJS library that's developed by Sasha Hubold. There was a great session about that with Elliot Harper and Sasha. So we can send you the link, because there is a standard way to do the authentication where you just include that library that's open source and available on GitHub, and then you have an authentication for that page.
All right, thank you. And speaking of authentication and ways to access cloud pages, do you guys want to talk about login pages or creating login methods for cloud pages for a few minutes? Is it possible? Can you do it? Should you do it?
It's possible. It's definitely possible. One of the ways is using that library or doing a custom development. But the thing is, with the custom development, you should be familiar with all of the best practices for security and securing web applications. So, and just keep in mind that you're somehow limited with server-side JavaScript because it's an older ECMAScript standard that's only allowed. So you just need to keep in mind that you develop that securely. And there are also some easier measures that don't require that much coding. For example, on my blog, I presented 2 options where you restrict access for internal users by using an IP restriction, and another version where I focus on API endpoints created by Cloud Pages, where you also use an API key and an API secret that's passed over to the endpoint. But also a real login screen using the username and password is possible. Then you also need to set some cookies, for example, or having something in the query string that authenticates your users. So that's definitely something that's possible, but I won't suggest doing so if you don't really know what you're doing. So that's definitely an IT or Salesforce partner task.
Okay. And speaking of that, talking about security for a minute, keeping on the same path, not really authentication, but more security. How do you use a SSO cert with a cloud page?
That's pretty easy. You just have to get in touch with your account executive, ask for the SSL certificate activation. You purchase that SSL SKU, and Salesforce provisions that for you. So after that, you have the selection to just let your users access the page via HTTPS, and that's about it.
And then it's more secure, yeah. And then, and I think I actually just asked the wrong questions. They weren't asking about SSL certs. They were asking about single sign-on, and I got the acronym wrong, so I do apologize to the person who asked online. They were asking about how to use single sign-on with Cloud Pages, which I think you spoke to just a few minutes ago whenever you were talking about the cookie method. All right. So, speaking of authentication, is there any best practices for authenticating users that hit the pages prior to showing them personalized information? So you kind of danced around this already.
The best process is going to be using those Cloud Page URL links. So making sure that only those recipients of your emails can click onto those pages. The risk, of course, about using that Cloud Page URL AMP script is if one of your users forwards their email to a friend or colleague, then that friend or colleague can access that original intended customer's personalized information if they click on that link. You could authenticate it further by asking that customer a secret question or by sending them a second factor authentication email. So for example, on the customer hitting that Cloud Page, you could trigger an email to the original subscriber's inbox saying, you've requested to hit this page, click here to proceed. But by doing so, you would be consuming more Cloud Page views, but also more super message credits. So it's kind of a very long way of going about a process to try and secure a page, which probably shouldn't have been exposing customer information if that was the case. So if you had a very specific use case, you could do that, but I can't imagine many marketing use cases where you would need to have that kind of safety checks.
Yeah, in addition to your answer, which I totally agree, it's also best practice of Salesforce to not store sensitive information within Marketing Cloud, and therefore also don't expose it on a landing page. So there shouldn't be the need to do such extensive security measures because you shouldn't expose sensitive information in the first place.
Exactly. And speaking of exposing information, let's talk a little bit about the different libraries available for Salesforce Marketing Cloud. I know there's some questions around exposing data with WS Proxy. Is there any security concerns while using WS Proxy in the Cloud Pages to perform some action without using external tools?
No, so the great thing about AMP script, WS Proxy or server-side JavaScript and other programming languages built into Marketing Cloud, all those processes take place server-side. So when the customer or subscriber hits that Cloud Page, the server is rendering all that information back of house, back on the servers, and then it presents that information to the subscriber on the cloud page when that cloud page finishes rendering. It will only show you information that you want that page to render. So you can have a whole lot of AMP script functions and WS proxy and server-side JavaScript functions all running in the background, but your customer won't see those functions unless you show it to them, unless you actively output the results of those functions. So you can make your cloud pages, and for example, an unsubscribed cloud page, it does need to process a whole lot of unsubscribed information against your subscriber list, but your subscriber won't see that information. All it sees is the thank you for unsubscribing page at the very, very end. So there's no security risk in showing or using those proxies or AMP script functions on your cloud pages. The only risk is if you then expose the results in a that may contain sensitive information. So as Marcus said, that shouldn't be stored in Marketing Cloud. But if you had to expose their name and address and otherwise, then that's the only risk you're going to have, is exposing that personally identifiable information.
One other risk comes to mind, or a security concern. If you are using WS proxy to send information to the API that you just received via form submit, then there is the risk of malicious code or malicious information that's put into that form. So you just need to validate all user inputs that you get, but that's standard best practice for web development, and it just also applies to
form sanitization. Great point, Marcus.
Yeah, and you can actually that's a good point to make whenever you're creating a form on the front end, is to have that front end validation do some of the checking on the data for you before you try to enter it into your data extensions, because there can be truncation issues and things like that if you try to enter in invalid data types, things like that. Okay. So let's talk about in the Marketing Cloud for just a little bit. Can you share cloud pages across multiple business units, or how can you log into another business unit from a cloud page hosted on another? I'm adding to that question. So first, can you share cloud pages across multiple business units?
Yeah, I can jump in there. So cloud pages are business unit specific. So if you want to use a cloud page with the query string parameters, it can only be used inside that business unit. I've not actually seen it being used across multiple business units, although I'd love to be corrected if someone knows otherwise. You can, of course, access cloud pages directly from the web or from other BUs, but they can't utilize the query string parameters, which is that special code that Marketing Cloud needs to have so it knows which subscriber is accessing that page.
And another thing to add, if you have multiple send authentication packages that have different URLs for the cloud pages, that could also be different when you switch to a BU, because there is another sender domain in place. But that's just a branding thing.
Yeah, and you can mimic branding definitely from another business unit, and you can use WS proxy to move data around from one business unit to another business unit. If a cloud page is hosted on one business unit and want data to be moved into another business unit, you can access WS proxy and make some SOAP calls and do it that way. Okay. So front-end possibilities, capabilities here. Can cloud pages use HTML5 and animations? Or is it like email?
It runs in the browser. It's just a normal web page, so you definitely can, yeah.
So you can pretty much do anything like you can with a normal web page, like host external JavaScript libraries like Vue and things like that as well, right?
Yeah, that's everything possible.
So think about it like a normal web page is just hosted in the Marketing Cloud, correct? All right.
Yeah.
Another great question that came in from the audience a little bit earlier on, and I was waiting for a good time to ask it, is would cloud pages be a good place to host a a content management system or a creative, and I lost the question, so excuse me if I'm asking this wrong, or is it a good place to host a creative tool for your email processes, content management tool for your email processes?
I'm not 100% sure if I understand the use case correctly. But so is it meant that that you want to host like a CMS for your emails?
Yeah, they're asking, I found the question, sorry about that. I asked it kind of convolutedly there. Is Cloud Pages a good place for me to build my Salesforce Marketing Cloud email design system? So you want to build a basic email design system in the Marketing Cloud that allows users to access content and then dynamically populate in emails. Is that correct, Christine? Calling you out by name now. Gentlemen, do you want to talk to that for a minute?
Yeah, so Cloud Pages, I think you've probably, from what you've heard so far, can do a lot of things. You could definitely build a content management process inside a Cloud Page to build your emails. You definitely can do it. You'd have to have a pretty specific use case to make that worth the development time to build that process into a Cloud Page. So if you do have a business use case, we are trying to generate unique emails very quickly, then you probably could, but I've never tried it myself. So it's an interesting question.
I'll answer it. I've built them before. You can do it. There you go. Just think about it. It's just a normal web page. Anything that you can do on a normal web page, you can do in a Cloud Page.
But it could be pretty costly if you use it, pretty extensively. Because
do you guys want to speak to the cost of the Cloud Pages and the resources for just a minute? The pricing model.
I'm not an expert on pricing, so the best way to cover that is speaking to your account executive and check what's part of your license. But Cloud Pages visits do consume super messages, so every page visit, except for a code resource, consumes one super message. So if you host public web pages that aren't just for your email campaigns, that could be pretty costly depending on the traffic that you expect these pages to have. So that's just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, and double check on your contracts too. There are some older contracts of Marketing Cloud where they're not using super messages for their entire impression cost. I know some of the older Cloud Page Marketing Cloud contracts have Cloud Page impressions as a separate line item. So double check, as Marcus said, with your account executive, check your contract. If you have super messages, then it will be one Cloud Page impression will cost one super message. If you have an older contract, it might be in the Cloud Page impressions line item. And so double check how many Cloud Page impressions you have, because I think the default's only a couple of 100,000 with most account levels. So also, as Marcus said, if you do host a form or a data collection point publicly with the Cloud Page, you could use a lot of your Cloud Page impressions very quickly if you have a lot of traffic going to those forms.
Okay. We have one here about Smart Capture. Can we update a data extension by using Smart Capture forms instead of custom built forms in a Cloud Page?
As far as I know, Smart Capture just stores new information. It's just like the web to lead option in Sales Cloud. So it's just creating new entries. Everything that you need to update requires some custom logic.
You can also make your own Smart Capture forms manually using AMP script or server-side JavaScript on a Cloud Page. So while the drag and drop Smart Capture forms are great, you can make your own form, and you can also make that form either do a append or an upsert to your existing data extension, which could solve that problem for you as well.
Absolutely, and that's kind of what we've been talking about throughout the call here, right? Is making custom forms and doing that in Cloud Pages. Okay, so does reCAPTCHA work on a Cloud form or on a Cloud Page? And which version of reCAPTCHA would you recommend if you were using it, if you were implementing it?
I've not actually implemented one of the CAPTCHA forms myself. Again, a cloud page is best used as a campaign landing page for your subscribers. So you shouldn't be suffering from the main reasons why you use a CAPTCHA form to filter out malicious actors. So I haven't tried it myself, but I know you can because they all are client-side JavaScript.
I have implemented reCAPTCHA a couple times on landing pages, and you can use it. I don't know which version is best recommended. I usually just pass the reCAPTCHA information or the credentials to use my client's reCAPTCHA. I work in an agency. So I don't know which version is best to use there, but you can implement reCAPTCHA on a cloud page. In a use case where a cloud page form submits sends to in a use case where a cloud page form submits and sends an email to the form user, is one route better or easier to set up? A, set up the form submit as a trigger send versus B, the form submits to a data extension, which is then entered into a journey, and the journey would then send the email. So which route would you guys think is the best method?
It depends on the use case.
Yeah, exactly what I wanted to say.
Great minds think alike. To answer the question though, Journey Builder also has multiple entry routes. So typically option 2 also has multiple options. You could enter into a data extension and use an automation to refresh that data extension every 15 minutes and add those customers into a journey. You could also trigger the add event Journey Builder API, which would add them into the journey via API. Alternatively, of course, you can use the send message API call to send that customer a standard message. I would always advocate to use Journey Builder over the triggered send if you intend to use that communication as the starting point of more conversation. If the email is a one-time email with no further communications required, then yes, the triggered send is a great one to use. It's very quick, there's no delay, whereas the Journey Builder standard send takes about 2 minutes to activate, unless you activate the high priority, which consumes 4 super message credits, but it will send in less than 30 seconds. So definitely a very use case based question. That depends on your business and what you'd use that form for.
If you're pretty sure that you just want to send one transactional email but still want to use Journey Builder, then you can also set up the transactional send journey, which is also pretty quick because in the background it uses the new transactional messaging API. So that's also a great use case for that. That's actually what I would recommend if it's just a single email you want to send. And the good thing is it also only consumes one super message, even though it's as fast as a high priority send.
There you go. All right. Let's see here. If your data is primarily managed in a data extension and preference center needs are pretty basic, would it be better to build a custom subcenter in Cloud Pages or to leverage the out-of-the-box subscription center and manage updates between the list and data extensions in Automation Studio? Or is there a better way to keep it simple?
I usually recommend using a custom preference center just because of the possibilities you have in terms of flexibility, branding, and scalability. So it's definitely an option to use the out-of-the-box one, but it's not very scalable. So if you're into a scalable solution, I'd go with a custom one using Cloud Pages.
Definitely, and I'll add to that too, that the standard Marketing Cloud preference center and unsubscribe page is a little bit dry. It's very Windows 95 in appearance. So for branding purposes, a custom landing page is also going to be much, much nicer for your subscribers than hitting that older looking preference center page.
Absolutely. And I agree. The out-of-the-box one is not very pretty, and it's hard, and you can't style it or anything. Okay, and if you want a uniform experience with your website and then you should probably just pick up the styling from it and move it over to the cloud page. Is that correct, gentlemen?
Yeah, definitely. That's very front-end developer of you, but exactly right.
Okay, can we create multi-step contact forms using cloud pages? Example, first form captures contact info. On clicking next, the next form appears to capture additional information.
You definitely can. There are some great JavaScript libraries that do that already. It just would be a progressive form. Again, you want to use client-side JavaScript for that, and there are some great libraries. You wouldn't want to be loading more and more cloud pages in the back as a kind of progressive form, because those cloud page views will keep costing you more credits.
Okay. And again, I'm going to go back to the question real quick. Whenever you say it's going to cost you more credits for a cloud page, it won't necessarily cost you more credits for that JavaScript resource page or an endpoint built using a JSON endpoint and resources, right? It's just the base landing pages themselves that cost the super message. Is that correct?
Yeah, just landing pages and microsites. Yeah. If you weren't making a progressive form, you'd have to use one of those page types, because the headers that it sends to the client's browser need to be that HTML type.
Okay. Let's see here. Did you guys want to get in the platform and show any examples or anything? Maybe a way to pre-populate the cloud page? I don't know. I'm just asking if you guys had anything you wanted to show in the platform.
There haven't been too many demoing questions just yet. There's still a few more questions going through that are coming through from the audience as well. But if there are some demo questions, I do encourage the audience to submit any questions about how to do some quick things. We are getting a little bit low on time, so we probably can't demo building an entire preference center. But any quick demos that we can give, send them through now into the questions.
I did see another question about SSL certs. Let's circle back up to that one real fast. They were asking about, sorry guys.
How many certs you can buy? Yeah. Curiously, a lot of account executives don't know that you do require multiple account SSLs to be installed into your instance. Now, I've heard differing stories from different account executives, so do be careful. Sometimes the answer is 2 and sometimes it's 3. That's how many certificates you have to buy to fully cover your instance. If you do install an SSL cert onto your cloud pages, that will mean that your customers will be directed to a HTTPS version of your page rather than the unsecured version. Do be aware though that once you get a SSL cert installed on your cloud pages, you do have to recreate those cloud pages. I've not found a way just yet to republish a cloud page to reuse the SSL certificate after you've purchased it.
And Marcus, do you have any recommendations around how many to purchase?
You need one for the landing pages, cloud pages, etc. And another one is for the content URLs, etc. That we can also provide you with the knowledge article link, so that pretty much describes everything you need to know, including all the measures you need to take after the configuration.
Okay. How do you add form submissions to a list, not a data extension? It's an interesting question.
I have not, in fact, but using WS proxy, it's definitely possible.
I'm just going to go ahead and throw it out there. It's best practice to use data extensions over lists.
Yeah, definitely.
It's much easier to manage your data, and you can access data extension or data in a data extension with SQL. You can't do that with a list, so it's just much easier to manage your data with data extensions.
The only cool function with lists, which I will add though, is the ability to manage subscriptions at a list level as opposed to the all subscribers list level. But publication lists, of course, solve that for your use of data extensions. So a data extension with publication lists is going to be far superior than using just lists by themselves.
Absolutely. How long does it take to switch over to a custom preference center once it's built? What's that process like? So I'm assuming moving from a sandbox to a live environment, to a production environment.
Yeah, I've done this a few times, so it kind of depends on a few things. Number one is going to be your local privacy laws. You do have to, in Australia at least, maintain an unsubscribe link for a number of days or weeks. I think it's 60 days, I think is our current law. So if you do get those requests that come through in that reasonable time, you have to make sure they can be processed. So if a customer has an email from in the past and they click on that email and unsubscribe, you still have to process it. Moving forward though, with your new emails, you could then use that new preference page link, the new cloud page URL link. And so all your your future emails could then use that new unsubscribe system. Developing those pages can take some time. It depends on how complex the account is. For very simple accounts that have just one business unit and no preferences or kind of interest lists that they might send to, it can be a very quick build, maybe a couple of days. I do have some customers, I'm also working for an agency, some customers that have, I think we've got 43 on one of our customers of different preferences that they send to.
Mm-hmm.
And so plugging in all those publications and lists takes a bit of time. And sometimes those projects can run into the weeks or months to develop. So it can take some time, just depends on how complex your account is.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's one reason why it's sometimes easier to use data extensions rather than this publication list even.
Yes, that too.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so speaking of list and publication list and all that good stuff, we just got another great question. They're saying that the out of the box is preferred for sure whenever you're using the preference center as far as the data management for publication list go. However, they're saying they need to join data into a data extension to get the views they need. Knowing that we can add data to them, knowing that we can add them to a publication list at send, do we need to do anything after the fact to maintain their preferences, specifically if they unsubscribe from a list? Will SFMC respect that during the next send if the target audience is maintained in a data extension? That's a great question. No.
That's a multi-level question. Good one there, Chris. Thank you. I'll jump in because I've actually had this problem before. You do have to be very careful with your subscriber data. Storing your subscriber information in a DE is by far the recommended way to do things. Exactly as Julian has said, a DE is much more flexible. You can create a field called email opt-in or is subscribed in these kind of email flag terms. And that way that when you do your send, you can make sure you do a data filter to only select customers who are currently yes to email marketing. Now, beyond that, when you do a send, if you do a commercial send type in your send profile, it'll also check against your subscriber list that you send to. So during your send process, you have to select a list. If you choose a publication list or all subscribers, it doesn't matter. It'll always check that subscriber key against that list to make sure they are currently subscribed. And if they're not in that list, it adds them to that list as subscribed. So you have kind of two levels of checks there. To answer your question though about do you have to manage them separately, I would still create a process to update your publication list with your data extension data to make sure those two lists are in sync. Having those two data points out of sync is effectively making two marketing flags, which is not great for data handling. So I'd recommend that you either use a file import to update those lists, or you can also use some AMP script or server-side JavaScript. Of course, with SSJS, you can use that inside a script activity in Automation Studio to update those lists on a regular basis, perhaps every 24 hours, to make sure that they do represent what your current subscriber statuses are.
Very good. Awesome. Thank you, guys. And I'm just going to call him out by name. Mr. Jacob Edwards, who is a JavaScript expert, said you can update list using SSJS. So to answer your question earlier, how do you add form submission data to a list? You can do that with server-side JavaScript per Mr. Edwards, and I will confirm that he is 90% correct there without knowing the answer to that myself. So because he's, like I said, an expert. Okay, do we have any other questions from the audience about cloud pages? Yes, we can share a link to the SSJS library mentioned. The SSJS library mentioned that we've been talking about it during this entire conversation is the one that's hosted by Salesforce Marketing Cloud. It's accessible, and guys, can you help me explain this a little bit? It's accessible in the Marketing Cloud itself without having to link to a library.
So the
like
SSJS platform?
Yeah.
Yeah, so
the
just like
SSJS that we
AmpScript.
use in Marketing Cloud.
Yeah, so SSJS is just like AmpScript. It's another language that Marketing Cloud can use. It's got a lot of commonalities with AmpScript. It's got some similar functions, but SSJS also has some very unique functions and some very practically functional ways that you can apply it on cloud pages to do something that you can't do in AmpScript. So you can simply search SSJS and Salesforce Marketing Cloud to access the developer.marketingcloud or .salesforce pages, which have all the documentation. And there's a good run through there of all the different functions that you can call in SSJS.
And I just provided a link in the notes there to the just the platform functions in the documentation, in the developer documentation for Salesforce Marketing Cloud, and we will pass you all the links that were added here after the call, and try to answer some more of the questions that might have gone unanswered, which I don't think any did go unanswered today. But if we did, any questions did go unanswered, we will try to answer them after in our follow-up email in the next day or two. Okay, someone is asking about the time it takes to refresh a cloud page after hitting publish. It can take up to 5 minutes to refresh on the backend servers, or to propagate on the servers to refresh a cloud page once it's published. Do you guys know any workarounds for that?
There are some interesting ones. Oh, yeah, Marcus, take it away.
You can use an external resource or a content block in Marketing Cloud and just include the content block via an AmpScript function in your cloud page, and then all your changes are reflected live. But that's something I would just recommend for development, but not for production use, because in production, if someone just changes that content block, you'll have a problem, because if there is an error, then your live page just breaks. So that's one possible solution for that during development, at least.
Absolutely, and you can use Dropbox or Google Drive or any number of
I've seen GitHub. I think I've seen a few good documentations from some of our community members about using a GitHub repository and using the GitHub API to retrieve that information. There's some very, very creative and great ways to return content quickly for your cloud pages without waiting for that publish time. One thing you can do too is, if your cloud page does not require subscriber information, when you hit that preview and publish screen, it actually will render the page for you straight away. So if you are just doing some quick tests, for example, I do some quick AmpScript tests, you can just press that preview button or the publish button and it'll render the page straight away. You can check the result and press cancel and do some more fixes and press publish again and check it again, and there's no waiting that way. But of course, if you do require subscriber information or to hit that page in production to make sure it works correctly, like an unsubscribe function, then yes, as Gina and Marcus have said, probably using some external resources would help that time.
Yeah, just a remark for using external services for hosting that. So GitHub repositories are public, so just make sure to not include anything in the code that's sensitive information. So yeah, just make sure to use that only if it's development or testing, or if it's nothing sensitive in there. Using the content block approach is definitely contained within Marketing Cloud, so there's not an issue there.
Okay. All right, guys, thank you so much. I think we only have a few minutes left, so we're gonna go ahead and close up here. Marcus, Cam, you guys have provided the audience with a ton of information here. The recording for this session will be hosted, or will be sent out in the next few days. And some of the answers to any of the questions that we might have missed, any links that were talked about that we will share, any libraries that we discussed, we'll share links to those in the recap email that will go out in the next day or two. Also, we'll do a We will post a recap of this session to howtosfmc.com, so you can come and check it out there if you did happen to miss it or want to review what was said here at any time, because the guys dropped a lot of information here. But thank you both for joining us today. And as always, thank you to Gilda, the hostess with the mostest, for putting on these sessions for us here, us developers and engineers for the Marketing Cloud, to gain greater insight and be able to use technologies that are given to us better.
Thanks for having us, and thanks to the audience for the great questions.
Mm-hmm.
It was a pleasure. Thank you all.
All right.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you,
Have
everyone.
a good day.